Good afternoon, Yohann.
Good afternoon, Jason.
How are you today, my friend?
I am doing fantastic. I'm so excited actually about this experience with you.
Yeah, me too. And Yohann, before the episode, we were just catching up. We know each other outside of just the podcast. Johann's actually one of my super fans. And I was telling him that when on my podcast platform, I can see where people come in from. And I always spot where he's going to share where he is in the world in a minute. Where he's from, I'm like, I think that's Yohann. So it's probably a fun experience for you to know how this is going to go for other people and then bring your own flavor to it. So I'm personally really excited to have you on. And with that, love if you'd give the audience a brief intro of who you are, what you're up to, where you are in the world, et cetera, et cetera.
So thank you, Jason. And yes, I've been listening from, I think, episode 1. And you invited so many interesting people that I'm like, oh my gosh, that would be absolutely amazing if one day I could be in it. So I feel very honored to be with you today.
Awesome.
So thank you very much. That's
welcome.
The first thing that I want to say to all the listeners, and then for them to understand a little bit more about who I am. My name is Yohann. I am a French person who came to the US a few years ago as an athlete and then left with a wife. I think that's kind of like what a lot of people do when you come and you go to a foreign country. So I came back to France and I worked over there as a professional athlete for a little while. And after my career was over, shifted to work because, I didn't make enough millions to be able to be living on an island by myself. So I had to work. So I've been working for a few years. Then I get. Yeah.
Well, I was just going to ask. So you're saying you didn't quite make Ronaldo money? Is that what you're saying?
Exactly. I was, and I think we'll talk about this during this episode. But I was the bench player, the practice guy. The one that doesn't sell any jerseys. So so that's who I was. And so after that, I worked for a little while and then moved to academia. I'm now a business professor, and I combine in all my knowledge of sports and my knowledge in research to have a new startup called Hive Skills IQ that is actually evaluating the soft skills of athletes and coaches around the world. So we are, working with some teams around the world, and so far we'll help, around like 7 or 8 teams win the national championship in different countries. Awesome. So it's been some cool experience because I can combine both of my passions. So I'm excited to be talking about this today with you.
Yeah, no, I'm excited to hear more. So you didn't mention it, but I said Ronaldo. So Yohann was a professional soccer player, which being a European is probably not a surprise to people listening because you're not an American football player, not a baseball player, not a basketball player, a professional soccer player, former professional soccer player. Very cool, Yo. And I'm going to call you Yo for the rest of the episode. So when you all hear this, you want to connect with Yohann. When you connect with him, feel free to call him Yo. I'm gonna give everybody permission to that, and then you can beat me up later if you don't agree with that, but that's okay.
It's totally fine. My students call me Yo, Dr. Yo. It's totally fine with me. I have no problem.
Dr. Yo. That sounds like a rapper. I like that. Dr. Yo. That's funny. All right, let's get into it, my friend. So first question for you, you know what's coming. What is something that you nerd out about?
Oh, wow. So I nerd out about the news. I know it sounds like a little bit odd, but I'm someone who spends, probably around 2 hours a day just reading the news. And I have some specific process when I do this because I'm reading the news from 5 different sources every day. So I got to get it from France. I have to get my news from another foreign country, usually England, or Al Jazeera sometimes. And then I get the news from the US, which I use like the NPR. And then I use one source from more like a democratic type of news and more of a Republican type of news. So I think that I have the right vision of what's going on around the world.
That's really smart. I don't spend 2 hours a day on the news, but I'm a news junkie. But I do not I use CNN, which is more left leaning. I feel like I should probably get a little more, and then I listen to the New York Times Daily Podcast, which is also left leaning. So you're kind of inspiring me to think about getting a little more more expansive in my viewpoint, because I think that's actually a really important thing, because if you're just reading from one perspective, then you're not actually getting the thing to think about. What's so you geek out about the news. Do you have a specific topic within the news that's most interesting to you?
I love politics. I'm absolutely love this. And just to give you a little funny fact about us and our friends, we did some bet during the elections in the US.
Mm-hmm.
We were betting on each state, who would win each state, and etc. And then I get 100%. So it was actually funny to be like seeing.
You called Arizona, Georgia, Nevada, Michigan, and Wisconsin and Pennsylvania for Biden?
Yeah. Yes.
Very
every
impressive.
Single one of them. And we can go into a debate of why. And and I mean, like, I can tell you the impact of who has been visiting each state at each moment, and especially the impact of Obama visiting some of the states over other states had a huge impact to my opinion. But this is just like, understanding the population, understanding who the people is in different states, understanding the needs and what they respond to. I think it's something that is very important, and listening to the news and some different podcasts, and you can have a sense of how people think and what's important to them.
Yeah. Do you listen to the most liberal podcast ever, Pod Save America?
Not really. Like, I don't really listen to political podcasts. I try to go more into like cultural ones. More try to understand like different scenarios, different types of audiences, and try to see if this type of groups in the population is growing or is reducing. Try to see if those ideas are actually growing or if those ideas are going down in the society.
Yeah. Don't think you have a lot of curiosity about the data, almost like the data part of it, which makes sense based on, as we're going to talk about what you do in Hive Skills and what you do as a professor as well. That's super cool. I haven't had anybody on the podcast yet say that they nerd out about news. So I always love when somebody comes up with something new, because sometimes you get the repeat. So interesting. And you've inspired me to think about, we'll have to talk offline about where else I could get my news, because I'm a little narrow right now. I have been a little narrow. The other place I love to get my news from is ESPN.com, which is neither conservative nor liberal. It's just purely sports, which is a great place to read about stuff.
But it's fascinating, like just talking about sports. Look what happened lately with Maradona passing. It's like one of the greatest soccer players of all time. And then you look at the news, and it's like headlines in every single country but the US. In France, they had a TV channel that did like a 24/7 on him. And then you come to the US, and it's in the bottom of the news in only one news. So it's very interesting to see how this is from a cultural standpoint, what matters to the people in these countries. And it's not good or bad. It's just like, this is how people, what they care about, and that's what they value.
Yeah. Yeah. Soccer, European football here. I'm from Minnesota originally, as I've talked about on the podcast. The MLS team in Minnesota, I saw made the Western Conference Finals in soccer. And I'm not a big soccer person, but I just like sports. And on ESPN today, I think it was like the article number 11 of this happened. When NFL football comes, the whole thing will be filled up with NFL football stuff. Like as we get into the NFL playoffs here, and I guess in 5 weeks, that'll be all the headlines. That'll be all the new stuff. It's like soccer's like a low on the totem pole for Americans. For a lot, I mean, Americans love soccer, but not to watch it, I guess, is the thing for a lot of people, and myself included.
It is growing in the US. And when you see in terms of audience, it's getting better and better, also because it's an audience that somehow is different than the audience in the rest of the world. So soccer is a very popular, it's the number one sport in the world. Sure. But it's usually practiced by people with lower income, in the rest of the world. When in the US, it's actually people who have a little bit more education because it costs a lot of money to practice at a young age. So you actually have a different types of audience who practiced it. They have higher income. And then because of that income, then they can spend more money at the stadium. So it's actually a good crowd to have. And that's why you see the number of teams in the MLS are growing fast. They're actually going to have like 2 more teams or 3 more teams again this year. So it's a good investment for people to invest in men's soccer, but women, it's becoming more and more, like a good return on investment as well. So we have new teams coming up, 2 new teams this year as well.
Oh, very cool. I didn't know that. I didn't know there's new teams. That's cool. Well, I know we're going to talk a lot more about sports. So I'm going to move to the next question. So, what's something that is inside of your comfort zone that might be outside of someone else's?
I travel a lot and I mix with population a lot. I absolutely love to be meeting new people, and especially new people with different cultures. Because, we'll talk about my background, but I grew up in a very multicultural environment in France. And that's something that to me, it's totally normal. So like meeting people with different languages, with different types of religion, different types of food, different types of values, it's something that I'm extremely comfortable with. Like they're different than me, but at the end of the day, it's totally fine. I'm learning from them. I'm discovering new things, and it's actually something that is fun.
Yeah. What and that's my experience with you as well. What advice would you give to anybody listening who, myself included? So I did not grow up in a diverse environment. I grew up in a very middle class, very white Protestant. I grew up in Minnesota, white Protestant, had 1 African-American student in my graduating class of 550. I don't think we had any Jewish students. And so for me, moving to New York back in 2005, which I've talked a lot about on the show as well, I really enjoyed the diversity as well, but I didn't really know what I was missing. Like, it's kind of when you're a kid, you don't really know what you don't know. For people that are out there that still have that fear of diverse environments and didn't grow up in that way like you did, what advice would you give somebody if they want to explore that further?
I think that the best advice is to evaluate, but do not judge. So you can observe the differences, but never evaluate them as like, oh, they're good or bad. Like, but look at them and see like, oh, they're doing this different than me. He's doing this different than me. But at the end of the day, that's just different. It's not better or worse. It's just they're doing things differently. And then knowing this can like help you even learn for yourself. Like, what would you duplicate? Well, I can do this because I think that was cool what he did or what she did, but I will not do that because I'm not comfortable doing this. So it's more about like pick and choose what's going on. But I always tell my students, and even for myself, I really try to like do not judge, which is tough. Let's be honest, because we're humans. But this is what I try to do.
Yeah, interesting. That's good. I like that. So let's take the flip side of that question and talk about something that you are uncomfortable with. In other words, it's something that's outside of your comfort zone that is likely inside of somebody else's.
Oh, wow. So, and you might laugh about this, but even if I grew up in that very, very unique environment, I grew up in a poor neighborhood in France, I was not exposed to a lot of things. Like, I've never done really risky things. And so when I say risky, that's when that's going to be funny. But like, I cannot do like roller coasters. Like this like scares me. Like I'm scared of getting on the bike, on bikes. Like there's some of those things like that I judge as risky. Like even going on those activities, when you go on the trees and then you walk between trees on some ropes or whatever that is.
Yeah.
Like this is just like, this scares this scares me a lot. And so I try to avoid all of those things that makes me uncomfortable because I'm just somebody who's scared of a lot of things.
Have you ever skydived?
No way, not even like close to this. That's like you're reaching. I'm at level 1, and then you're talking about level 10 right there.
So you're like, I'm scared of walking on like a rope between trees. I'm like, have you skydived? Yeah. So like for you, it sounds like there's something that's outside your comfort zone, because everything you just said there is all physical based stuff. So there's something about like physical risk taking that you're just not comfortable with.
Yes.
Interesting. I want to probe further, but I'm trying to think of another thing I could ask you. Have you ever, so you said you're scared to get on a bike. So you mean like to actually just go and take a bike ride? That's something that you're not comfortable with?
I mean a motorbike. A motorbike for me,
motorcycle.
It's something. Motorcycle, yeah. No, I love to bike. I love these things, but yeah, just to give you an idea, I learned to swim a year and a half ago.
Mm-hmm.
So me and just do scuba diving, all of those things were like so scary to me, and it took me a while to just like almost like put my head underwater. And I'm still, still stressed about a lot of things. And so I'm working on it, but that's something that for a lot of people are just like basic and very easy. And then for me, it takes courage to do those things.
Yeah. Well, it's interesting because my experience of you, so I think I mentioned Yohann and I know each other outside of the podcast. My experience of you is not that. I would never actually, I don't even know if we've ever talked about this, but I wouldn't guess this from like spending time with you and your energy that you bring. I would never guess that this is something that is like this kind of physical, you could die from this thing is actually something that is uncomfortable for you. Like, I think we're all uncomfortable with things that could die, but like this is actually a very surprising answer, and it's super interesting to me.
I know it's not what people expect, especially when you've been like a high level athlete. You expect someone who takes a lot of risk or like do those things. But actually, what you realize is that most of the athletes have been sheltered during the time of their careers. Like you don't want them to be hurt. So in all my contracts, I was not allowed to ski. I was not allowed to be on a motorcycle. I was not allowed to do all of those things that might have been dangerous and might like hurt me. So, which to me was just like, okay, so, I mean, I don't have the money to do all those things anyway, so it's not an issue. But when I had it, then I was not interested because it was part of the contract and I just respected it.
Yeah. That's, it's very interesting. Okay. I'm going to talk a little bit about speeches. You speak all the time. You speak for a living, right? That's kind of like your professors. That's what you do. You teach and speak. So I know you own the classroom, virtual classrooms in the age of COVID here in December. So I give you 5 minutes, Yo, and you get to talk about whatever you want to, and the whole world gets to hear it. What would you want to talk about and why?
I think one of the things that I actually like to talk about is to really explain to everyone that we have something special to bring to the world. And I know it sounds like a little bit like, wow. But it is the reason even why my company is called Hive Skills. Mm-hmm. And I truly believe that like the world is like a hive, that everybody brings something, everyone brings like a brick to build a house. But it's really something that I think it's important, because when you think about this situation is you can be the best innovator in the world. You will need people to execute your idea, or then the idea doesn't make any sense. You can be the best quarterback, and then you have no offensive line, and then now you cannot make a pass because you have no time to make that pass. So it's really like trying to pass the message along that we should not be like disrespecting some of the work of some people, and then we should actually value things that are done, because this is very important. And most of the time, like we really focus on what we're not good at, when I truly believe that we should actually focus on what we are good at. And my 5 minutes would be on like using the strength of each individual to try to get the best out of those people and get the best contribution. And that's something that is very important. Like I believe that everybody, if we focus on our strength, we can gain a competitive advantage on other people. And it's not only like, like being extremely smart and finding the idea that nobody else can. Being the best at something, it's like when I was a student, I was like working in a perfume factory and I was putting labels on the bottles, or you put the cap on the bottle. Like I always told myself like, oh, you got to be the best at this. And the best doesn't mean that I have to be the fastest. It could also be like, I'm going to be a nice person. So then like, if they need to replace someone, they're not going to replace me. So how do you make yourself like that they're not going to replace you, that you're going to be a competitive advantage for this organization? And so, yes, you can be the fastest. You can be a very nice person. You can be a great partner. You can be somebody that makes zero error, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. So you got to find what makes you unique and then really work this. So then you become extremely unique and you're bringing something to the world that nobody else does. And if everybody does this, then we're going to have a better place and a better companies. And I believe in this.
Yeah, that's awesome. I know we're actually, this is when we come back from the commercial break, which we're going to go to now, we're going to talk more about this because this is specifically the methodology that you use at Hive Skills, specifically in athletics. So we're going to come back and talk about that. We're going to take a really brief commercial break and we'll be right back.
The Talking to Cool People podcast is brought to you by Jason Frizzell Coaching. Jason works with amazing people who are looking to find and develop their passion and purpose and create their journey to wherever it is they want to go. Check us out at jasonfrizzell.com, Facebook, or on Instagram. Jason loves hearing from anyone who thinks it would be cool to connect, to be coached, or to be a guest on our show. Email him at podcast@jasonfrizzell.com or DM him on Facebook and Instagram. And now, back to some more amazing conversation on Talking to Cool People.
All right, Yo, we are back. How are you doing?
I'm doing great. Thank you for having me back. I made it past the halftime.
You made it past, well, not maybe halftime. You made the cut to continue the episode. So that's always a good thing. And speaking of competitive advantages. All right. So now this is the part of the show where I like to have my guests talk about what's got them to quote unquote today. So I'm not necessarily, so we're recording this on December 4th, 2020, not necessarily today, but a little bit about your journey. So what we learned about you so far is your French and that you played professional soccer. When you finished with that, you did some other things in corporate. You're now a professor and you were also the CEO of an awesome company called Hive Skills. And so I'd love to hear a little bit about like how that path went for you and then what you're up to today. Maybe some more specifics around a little bit about what you teach as a professor, and then also love to spend some time on Hive Skills because I think it's really interesting.
Okay, so concerning my journey, I think we have to talk about my background and where I grew up in France. So I grew up in what would be the projects in the US. Mm-hmm. So I grew up in that environment. So it was actually, I loved it. It was awesome. We didn't have money. So that was actually something pretty cool.
Does France, I just had a question for you about this. Does France provide, it's like subsidized housing like we have here in the States where the government pays for part of the rent or provides like a lower end. It's like, is it, I'm just thinking about it like New York, we have a lot of those places. Actually, every state has these, but when you say that environment, that when you call it the projects, can you explain what that's like in France for the audience and for myself to make sure that we all understand the context of that? Because my context is specifically around what that means in America.
Yes, so that's a great question. Thank you for asking. Mm-hmm. So France is a socialist country. Even if now we have a government that is not totally socialist, which is like in the middle, but that's still, we still have that core values after, the socialist type of organization, which is based on the idea that I'm going to do a little bit of a history of socialism, but that companies do not redistribute the money wisely. The capitalists, the people who owns the capital, actually keep money for themselves, do not redistribute it well to their employees and the other people. So it's the role of the government to be taxing more companies and then redistributing that money to the poor people. Let's make it simple. So in that idea, France taxes a lot. So, when I came to the US, it was funny because everybody complains about taxes, but France taxes a lot. Just to give you an idea, my last taxes was 65% in France.
Oh my God.
So just to give you an idea. But because of this, then, you get free education, free healthcare, a lot of free stuff. And then for people who do not have much money, then you can actually benefit from having housing sponsored by the government. So you pretty much don't pay the rent, and then you can live in those buildings. Then when your income goes over a certain limit, then you have to leave and go to another types of housing. So if you live under a certain amount of money, then you can benefit from those housing. And this is where I grew up. So I grew up in that environment with people who had sponsored housing. And so it was mostly like a very diverse population, like I was saying. We were 2 white people in my soccer team. And then we had a bunch of kids from Northern Africa, from Western Africa. Then we had some people from Asia as well, the Middle East. So it was this very, very mixed type of population, plus some people from like Portugal or some of Southern Europe. So very, very interesting type of community. And then because of that community, we were very good at soccer. In my small village or city, we went to the final of the French Cup as a kid at like 10 years old. So then after that, I was performing extremely well at soccer. I was playing with the French national team. I was very good up to a moment then in my teenage years. Then I forgot to grow. I mean, you know me, I'm 5'6" right now. So I've always been extremely short. So then at some age, like I just was the tiniest, and I didn't make it to go and sign my first pro contract. So it was one of the moments that I actually had to continue at school, because, in France, you stop sports. You stop school to be able to practice sports at the high level. So I could do both in parallel because I was not with the highest level anymore. And then this led me to actually a very different path than most of my friends, is that as a good student, at some point I had to go to the US to study in one of the partner universities. Mm-hmm. And that's what happened. I arrived, and then I got a full scholarship to go to UNC Chapel Hill, who just won the national championship the year before, and they wanted me, they gave me the full ride, and I had to go there and play soccer. But at the last minute, my school said, "No, you're not going because they're not partners with us. So you have to go to one of our partner schools." And then my friend, because you're not supposed to have agents, so they're just friends of ours.
Right.
Just sent my resume, and then I get a response from 2 universities, and I ended going to the University of Akron in Ohio. I had no idea where it was on the map, so it's actually hilarious. Like I was just like, all right, so let's go there. It seems like, and then I went to the University of Akron. We had one good year. We went to the 3rd round of the NCAA tournament. Mm-hmm. So it was okay, the Sweet 16. Everybody was happy. So the university asked me to come back, pay for my MBA so I could continue being a student and then play for the soccer team, which I did. And then as a senior, I was first team All-American. So I went to the MLS Combine. I signed 4 years for the MLS, but never played because I decided to go back to France and took a better contract with one of the teams in France. And that was the end of my journey, I thought, in the US. I went back, and then I played for a few years professional in France. And then I moved to playing as a semi-pro and then work at the same time. Because I wanted to be able to use my degree. And actually, like I told you, I was not making a ton of money. So if I would be semi-pro and working, I would make about the same amount of money that if I was a full pro. So then I'm like, let's do this so I can use my degree and build a career for the future. I tried to be a little bit long-term oriented on that approach. And then when I was working, I was at the same time teaching because schools asked me to come and teach. So I did this, and I realized that I'm not smarter than the professors, but I'm not dumber than them. Like I could actually do that full time. They have a good life and it's a lot of vacation, a lot of freedom. So I could do it. And I'm like, okay, let's try. So I got my PhD and then I just moved to academia. So that was one of the moves. And the fun part is that being in academia allowed me and my wife to go back to the US, and we've been back for 4 years now in the US. And I'm a professor, and I'm still working on my business that was developed actually through my PhD. So what I studied in the PhD was trying to understand how job seekers fit with the culture of companies. So when they apply, how do they evaluate their soft skills with the culture of their company? And that's what I pioneered as a researcher. And then a friend of mine actually was playing professional basketball in France, and we had a conversation, and he was telling me, that famous sentence that the coach does not understand me. And I'm like, what do you mean, And I'm like, you speak English. The coach speaks pretty good English actually in France. So what do you mean? Like you don't understand each other? So we had a conversation, and we realized that we were actually talking about what I was studying. We were talking about culture. We were talking about the fact that like the expectation from the coach was different than the expectation from the player, and there were a mismatch in this. So then we're like, okay, let's try to use the tool that I invented for the PhD. Let's try to use it in sports and see if it helps you or not. So we did that, and then after like a month, they both understood like how each other were working. And then they started to actually adapt their style to each other. So they adapted their behavior. The coach adapted his communication. And by the end of the year, the team finished second in the league. And my friend was in the top 3 best players in the league. So we continued working. Then the next year we worked together, and he got MVP. So it was just something very fascinating to see that, yes, we can actually optimize the performance of a person if we find the right way to coach that person. And to find the right way to coach that person, we need to understand both sides of the coin. You need to understand how the coach operates, and you need to understand how the players operate to really find where it matches and where it doesn't match. So that's how actually the business started at this moment. And I just called some of my former coaches and be like, hey, I invented this stuff. Do you guys want to try it? And they're like, okay, let's do it. So then I tried it with different teams, and we won an international competition in Africa with a team. Actually, we did something unbelievable, but we shocked the world with Zambia winning the African Cup for the first time.
Yeah.
And then after that, like the coach said, come with me. So and then I followed that coach and helped them with different teams, and we had such good results that now the word spread. And then other coaches were asking me to come and help them. And so that's how the whole business started. And now we're in the US, helping some of the teams here in the US. We reached the Final Four with some college teams. We won the MLS. We helped some teams qualify for the World Cup. So it's actually very funny to see that such a very basic and simple approach works with any types of sports.
Yeah, that's cool. I highly encourage anybody listening who's interested in this, which my guess would be most people, and we'll put this in the show notes, but the actual website is, we'll put the website in the show notes, but I do want to ask you before we move on, how does it work? So like, let's say I'm out here, I'm a coach of a professional sports team or high school, college. And I think my understanding is, that this is available. This is applicable to anybody who is like a general manager, an athletic director, or a coach is your market. So it doesn't have to be in a pro or a semi-pro. It can be like high school, college, whatever. What is the thing that I actually get from it? Like, how do I use it? And then, in other words, like, what's the process? What's the process? I say, hey, I call you up and say, hey, yo, like, I've got this soccer team and we've been struggling over the last couple of years. I want to implement this for my team. What does it look like? What's the process that I'm going to go through with myself and my team?
So the process has changed over time because we started to be, like I said, like a very niche type of things, working with top teams, pro teams, national teams who have a lot of money. They want to win, so they invest to win.
Yep.
And so the way that we were working was we used to do questionnaires to players, interviews, 360 interviews with the other players, the coaching staff, and then we were doing observation during games and observation during practice. So they were flying me to come for a week, spend a week with the team, do all of that stuff. And then 2 weeks later, I was sending them a report that was actually like looking at all the data for each players. But this was extremely costly. It was like, I mean, you might laugh, but it was like $1,500 a player.
Oh, sure.
So, like for a college team, like very limited number of college could pay that.
Sure.
So what we were discussing actually here in the US was, can we find something that would be cheaper, but still efficient? And so we, once again, as a scientist, I looked at the difference between just doing the questionnaire and doing the entire process with questionnaire, interviews, observation. And we realized that we had 87% of the same answers. So you could get 87% precision just through the questionnaire that an athlete answers. And we're like, okay, let's try to actually create a system that will make everything automatic. So you go online, you pay, you take your questionnaire, and then boom, in a minute, you receive your report that tells you who you are as a player. And that's what the tool is about. The tool is about having like a guide of who the player is and how to coach that person.
Yeah.
And so that's what we do. So if you're a coach, you're buying like 25 reports, and then you send them by email to your players. They take the questionnaire, boom. You as a coach, you look at your dashboard, and you can click on each player to have the guide of how you can like coach that player. But you can also look at the data. So and we can spend hours talking about this, but we evaluate about 65 data points.
Yeah, that's a lot.
Yeah, it's a lot, but it's something that is important because when people talk about fighting spirit, for example, what is fighting spirit? Fighting spirit, it's a combination of things. Like some people will look at it from an aggressiveness perspective, but it's not only aggressiveness; it's also about tenacity. It's about competitiveness. You have to look, and those are different components. I can be extremely aggressive, but I'm going to quit soon. I'm going to do it one time and then quit. Okay, is that really fighting spirit then? So by looking at those different variables inside bigger things, now you have a better understanding and you can compare players with one another. But the best is you can actually look at what you need to develop with those players. So you can see like this is a benchmark, and then you say, okay, this guy is too low in aggressiveness for his position. Maybe I will try to push him to develop that skill during our training programs. So what's going to happen is when you do your regular training with the team, now the coach can actually like have a specific way of communicating to some people to help them develop specific soft skills that will help them for the rest of their skills, tactical, technical, and physical skills during the game.
Yeah.
So that's really how the process works.
Gotcha. That's awesome, yo. Congratulations. That sounds like, and you said this earlier, it's such a perfect combination of who you are and like having a PhD and learning about these things from a performance management perspective, being still an athlete, but a former professional athlete. And now taking all that, and to me, you're the perfect example of taking all your different passions and things that you care about and actually creating a business based on that. So it must be so fun for you to create a business like this because you're obviously passionate about all of these things.
Yes, it's so much fun every day, except when I have to chase clients. As you can imagine, I am passionate about my tool, and it's fascinating to observe that I would say about 90% of the people we sat down and we present the tool to, they're like, oh my gosh, this is unbelievable. Like, I need that.
Yeah.
But it's fascinating to observe. So I'm like, yeah, that's no problem. Let's do this. But it's fascinating how the world of sports can be locked. So it's extremely hard to have access to the people. Because, everybody's protecting the team, everybody's protecting the environment, which makes sense, but it's fascinating to observe these things. And so, that's just what I observe. And so as a scientist and a researcher, I'm passionate by the tool and the results and the performance.
Yeah.
But of course, this is another type of job than like chasing clients and contacting them and doing that work and trying to convince them like without even seeing anything, So this is challenging. And that's why I'm saying when we're talking about like understand who you are to be able to like see what's your competitive advantage, like we know as a company, we have an amazing tool. Like every single experts in the world just are like, we love it. We want to try this thing. Yeah. But then it's the challenge of sitting with these people. That is a skill that we need to develop, and we don't have it so far. So it's fascinating.
Well, I coach a lot of entrepreneurs. I guess I'm I run my own business. I have yet to find an entrepreneur who does anything who's like, you know what? I have way too many clients. I've never heard anybody say that. So you are not alone. Client acquisition, especially when you're starting out and you're kind of doing it from the ground level, it's totally normal, and getting the people to pay attention. But at some point, as the more teams you get to use this and we get out of COVID, word's going to get out, and then, who knows where it's going to go from there. But I think you're going to have some phenomenal success.
Yeah, thank you very much. I appreciate that. And it's funny that everybody that uses us, the point of reference that they have is, oh, you actually like Moneyball. You have seen the movie Moneyball.
Yeah. Oh, yeah.
And then what we do is exactly what Moneyball does, except that Moneyball does it with what we call the hard skills. So they evaluate,
sabermetrics,
your runs, your hits. Exactly. What we do is the same thing, but we do it with the soft skills. So we evaluate the people. And so and we're the only one in this market. So it's actually very interesting to see that like a lot of stats company are like coming at us and be like, hey, can we combine our strength because we can create something unbelievable? And so that's how we say most of the time. We are the Moneyball of soft skills.
Yeah, it's great. And I guess, does that make you Brad Pitt? He played Billy Bean, the manager. So I guess you're a shorter version of Brad Pitt.
No, I told you have to remember who you are. I am definitely not Brad Pitt.
Okay.
I hope I'm Brad Pitt for my wife, though. That's all that matters at the end of the day.
I think you probably are, at least sometimes. That's awesome.
All right. So the thing that you were talking about around Hive Skills, I have some more questions for you. I'm curious about some of the things you mentioned. Do we have time to spend a little more time on this?
Yes, please.
Excellent. So I'd love to hear more about what you invented. Like, what is the Hive Skills framework? Like, what actually is the tool?
Okay, so the idea is to look at the mental aspect of the game. So what everybody says all the time, when you try to perform, it's always about the technical skills that you have, the tactical skills, the physical abilities, but then comes, the mental aspect. And when science is really focusing right now on the first three, what we call the hard skills, then very few people can evaluate the soft skills. And that's what we've been working on. And that's what we invented, was a way to measure those. And when we look at science, it's actually interesting because we work with sports team and high performers in sports. But there is the science comes from a lot of different fields. So we developed our tool by looking at 6 main pillars of sports skills. So those pillars are, number one, we look at what we call performance mentality, which is usually the psychological factors, who you are as a person. So nothing very new. Now I can get into the details because you have different characteristics in there, like, fighting spirit. You go into details like other aspects like teamwork. How do you rank for those types of things? Your work ethic, your emotional control, and then the passion. Those are like around that performance mentality of yours, who you are as a person. This comes from the field of psychology for most of it, and sports psychology. Then we look at the emotional intelligence, but very specific to sports. So do you know yourself well? and can you understand the environment that you belong to? So do you understand your coaches? Do you understand your teammates and all of that stuff? So emotional intelligence, which once again, I'm in Ohio. The key of emotional intelligence, some of the big gurus are from Cleveland, so they're pretty much our neighbors. So that's pretty fun stuff.
Oh, I didn't know that. So Cleveland has a lot of emotional intelligence experts.
Correct. Some of the Case Western has some of the top researchers in emotional intelligence. So then like some of their new activities, we can be in touch, discuss with them as colleagues, and then like sometimes even do research together in that aspect.
Cool.
So this is the second part. Then the third aspect, it's about how do you act? It's that idea of what are the winning habits that you put in place. And so in that category, we discuss like motivation, goals, performance evaluation, all of that types of things. And what's very important is to understand what's the process that the people are putting in place. So in our case, the athletes, like, are they good or not at setting up goals or at evaluating their performance? Who is involved? When do they do it? How do they do it? Etc. etc. Because that's important to understand, because when we're giving advice to coaches or when the coach look at our report, you want to see, for example, the level of comfort that the athlete has with evaluating performance. You want to know if the coach should talk to the player one-on-one, or if the coach can talk in front of the entire team and give feedback right away to the player. So those are these types of information that you will find in the report. So then they are extremely specific. So then you know how you communicate with the player or with his or her environment. Like sometimes players, they have parents who are very important in the process. And sometimes they listen to the parents more than they listen to the coaches. So now the report will tell you that. So as a coach, you can go and talk to the parents to make sure the message is heard by the player. So that's the third part. Then another section is about how do you interact with others. So we call that section about interpersonal skills. So we measure in that the concepts of leadership, the learning style, the communication, and going both ways. It's both how you communicate to others, but also how you receive the information and which style will be appropriate for you, coming from a coach or from another teammate. So that's when we bring that information to the coaching staff as well. Then once you do that, you're okay, I get the main 4 characteristics, but this is in a perfect world. And unfortunately, the world is never perfect. You can be facing challenges. And that's why we're looking at the 5th characteristics about how do you respond to challenges and how those challenges like stress, anxiety, adversity, and mistakes have an impact on all the things that we talked previously. How are you going to change? And then we can see that. We can tell the coaches and the players how they're going to change depending on those different situations. Once again, all of those, they're never good or bad. That's just the way that you change and the way that you behave based on those circumstances. If I'm under stress, I tend to underperform because I'm going to try to stop taking risk. I'm going to avoid making risk. That's just who I am.
Yeah.
But maybe you, Jason, you're going to do something different. And maybe you will be the opposite, I made a mistake. And I need to change the things that I was doing. I'm going to take more risk. And then that's what the report is showing to the coaches. And then the coach can decide if that's what they like or not in the player. So that's another category. And then finally, the final characteristics, it's about coachability. And can we change or not? And so we actually work on coachability and coming from different fields. Especially even from sales. We even get some stuff coming from the field of sales on coachability. And what we discover is that we have 5 characteristics who influence coachability, or we have those beautiful words now, like talent development, like we say in companies. So are those talent be able to develop or not? Or are they going to have something that will block them, which is the same in coaching. You know what I mean? I heard a lot of coaches talking. So you can measure scientifically those potential blockers. So the science brought 5, and then we add 4 of those because this is one of the paper that we're actually writing right now as academics. But so that's how we evaluate also coachability through those factors. We can also be bringing this to coaches or players and be like, okay, this is the button you need to press on to make sure that the player will be able to change and adapt to the new environment. So those are extremely, extremely powerful because like it's funny how it comes. Some stuff can come from yourself. As an athlete, you tend to do not be motivated enough, and that will block your ability to be coachable. But then some other can come from your relationship with others. So we were talking about trust before the show, and that's one of the factors. And then the trust can be seen from trust towards yourself, trust with the teammates, trust with the coaching staff. So you can also look at those 3. So when you look at the report, you see which one will be the blocker. If one of them is, but then like you will see out of those 9 factors, you will be able to see exactly what would be the potential blockers. So then even if some of those factors are not great for you, those first 5, then you know that player is potentially capable of changing.
Yeah, gotcha. So I've talked about this in the show before, and I think you know this. I'm certified as a disc practitioner, and I'm also Clifton Strengths Global Coach, which just means I went through Clifton's. Used to be called Strengths Finder. Now it's called Clifton Strengths. This sounds like a sports version of those tools where you help people identify their strengths, their challenges, and then you also can use it with teams to build a cohesive organization that's not just about the one player, but it's about actually how do these pieces all fit together to give us the best chance of, in sports, I would assume it's winning. Most of this, like at the end of the day, that's the thing. So how do these compare to disc, and how does this compare to disc and Clifton Strengths in terms of like, how do you see them same, different? And I know it's a different market, but how do you see it? Like, it seemed like, I'll put it this way, seems like what Hive Skills is doing is inspired by tools like this in the corporate realm. And now you're bringing this to the sports world.
Correct. So that's funny because that's exactly the case. And my PhD was actually developing one tool that could advance the science. And that's what I did through my PhD, which was dedicated to companies. And then that's during the PhD that I actually tweaked what I invented to make it work for sports. So you're totally right. Like I actually built something that goes beyond like the disc or the strength finder. I still call it the strength finder.
Yeah, me too, until I went through the training. And I'm like, oh, it's Clifton Strengths now. They just changed it a couple of years ago.
Yeah. So, but it's the same. So we developed something that I would say is about similar in the approach, but we joke saying this is one on steroids. So if you're actually looking a little bit at the disc in more detail, so the disc look at pretty much DISC, we're looking at 4 main factors, and they tend to be very generalistic. I mean, they come from like the 70s, like some of that research. So we just used all the science that was invented between then and now. So it's been like quite a bit of time. So now we have 65 factors in the things that we do. And of course, we specialize this in sports, and which there is pretty much no competition except a few tools for sports psychologists that they use. But it's the same thing. What they do is just having like 3 or 4 factors that they really focus on, but they don't see the big picture of the athlete. So what we try to do is to offer the 65, and we know that coaches don't need the 65 factors.
Right.
Like depending on what's the culture of your team, you're gonna really pay attention to like 10 or 15 of them, and then you want to have them at a certain level, and then another team with another culture will pay attention to maybe 15 other ones. But at least you have that information, so you know how you can use this in case of you need it. So it's really this approach that we're taking, and we want to do it also in a way that is extremely clear and very practical. Like once again, what we heard from the market research that we've done was the disc is great, and I don't want to say anything negative about it, but like the disc is great, but it's tough to implement. I'm a coach. I'm not a sports psychologist, so it's tough for me to implement. Or I'm not an assessor. So the disc understood that, and now they have people like you. They are certified to help in the process. because the tool is not easy to, I mean, it's easy to understand, but it's like, what am I doing with it?
Right. It's like, what's the output of it?
Exactly. And that's what, like, so many people bought it because it was the only thing in sports that exists. And then they stop buying it because they're like, I cannot really use it. So now we try to invent something. I mean, we invented something that is easy to use and very practical, that speaks the same language with their words, their expressions, their data that they want to have. And so those are the things that tend to make more sense for them. That's really the idea in terms of competitive advantage.
And I love that, because this is kind of my last question for you around all of this. So what is the value to, and I'm just thinking out loud here. I see an athletic director or a team owner saying, yes, let's do this, signing the check. And coaches can take it. The players can take it. I'm also thinking out loud here. And I think you also have an eye on potentially referees, which would be a different structure, but like, what is the value to the community? So let's say that I'm a general manager of a soccer club. Football, yes. It's called football in Europe. We call it soccer here in the US.
Yes.
I'm being a smartass. And I say, hey, like, I talked to this guy, he seems great. I think we need this for our team. And I take it. I have the coaches take it, I have the players take it. What is the value to my team, and what is the value to me as an owner or the general manager around that?
Yeah, so there are really like three main factors, I would say. Like, the first one is recruiting. So a lot of people are using this as a recruiting tool, and especially for making sure that you fit with your culture. So by measuring the average of your team, you can have an understanding of what's the culture of your team. And then by doing the assessment with potential newcomers, you will be able to see if that will be an easy lift or not. Because sometimes, you need some skills. You need skills that you don't have on your team right now. So that person will be different. They will bring something great to the team. But from a human perspective, you don't know if that's going to be a good match. So the thing is, we can tell them where the mismatch will be potentially. So then what do you have to pay attention to make sure that you see the red flags when they arrive? And then the problem doesn't become cancer. You know how to deal with that person, and then you improve your management. And I think that's one of the key things is around the managerial aspect of it. Yeah. So once you have your team together, how do you optimize each player? So to do that now, we joke because we invented it as like a guide. This is the guide for the player, each player. Yeah. This is how you coach me. I'm giving it to you. And then do that, and I'll be good. And we're joking, but it's actually true. Yeah. That's what happened. Like, we're telling you how to coach each person. So this is great. But you can also use that for the future. Like, you can use this as a benchmark and then see, like, okay, that's where you are right now. This is where I want you to be in 6 months or in a year from now. And so from having that benchmark right now, you can develop a program just like you develop your program for the technical, tactical, and the fitness level of the players, but you develop your mental aspect, the soft skill aspects as well. And then you can reevaluate at the end of the season and then see if the player developed those skills or not. And then that can be reused again for the recruiting, because, for example, for academies, they can evaluate the players every year and see if they would be staying with the club or if they would be offered a professional contract. So it's actually used for a lot of different ways, by the teams. And actually, it's funny because now we have a lot of stats company knocking at our door and saying, oh my gosh.
Oh yeah, sure.
Like we offering all the hard skills, like GPS data and all of that stuff. And we don't have any data about individuals, who they are as people. So can we combine our strengths together and then be able to get this, so we can create a superpower type of tool for teams, clubs, federations, whatever type of organizations around sports.
Awesome. Thank you, Yo. I really appreciate you clarifying all of that we so we could go into that and like just give myself more information on what you're actually up to, because I realized I didn't ask you for any details, and that makes a lot more sense now.
Okay, thanks.
All right, let's move on. And this is where you get to ask me something, and I'll keep it short because I want to get back to you, but I'm going to put myself on the clock, because if I don't put myself on the clock, I am liable to run over. So I'm going to put myself on a 3-minute clock. So what would you like to ask me and have answer for you and for the audience?
what I want to know is, so we know each other. So what's interesting to me is your journey so far, and especially you moving from the Midwest to New York City. Now you live in the countryside, and so my question is like, what is next? Where do you see yourself living in 5 years from now, and why?
Yeah, I think it's an interesting question, and I'm a planner. So it's actually been interesting for me to not have a plan. And I think this is normal during COVID, that a lot of people have just kind of like, okay, let me just take it year by year. But the 5-year thing is interesting. I think in 5 years, so we live in Brooklyn, and then we're staying up in staying up in the Catskills right now because of COVID. I think I am pretty positive we'll be back in Brooklyn within a year or maybe 2 at the most, because we love New York City. I'm from the Midwest. My wife is a fellow Ohioan, like your wife is an Ohioan. She went to Ohio State. She's like grew up and went to high school in Columbus, and we both moved to New York on our own. We didn't know each other. So we chose New York, and we love New York City, and our daughter loves New York City. So I think we'll be back to New York City, living in the city. And I think our plan, although it's fluid, I think our long-term plan is to always live in New York City, at least part-time, because it really fits with our lifestyle. We love it. It really fits with our personality. And we're a little different, that we actually want to raise our kids in New York City. A lot of people they have kids and they move out of the city. I actually think the opposite. And I think it stems a bit from how I grew up. There's nothing wrong with how I grew up, but it's what I mentioned earlier. It was not diverse. And I think there's something super cool about your kids going to school in New York City and having that experience of being a little New Yorker and walking outside and seeing people of all shapes and sizes and colors and ethnicity and religion, and that it's just okay. And it's just the way of life, versus what you were talking about earlier. What's comfortable for you is that as well. That's not comfortable for a lot of people. A lot of people that I grew up with, that is not a comfortable place for them. They want to be around people that look like them, act like them, and talk like them. And we actually don't want that for our family. So I would say in 5 years, we'll be living in Brooklyn, where we used to live and still have a place, and we'll be living. And so we'll be back.
Exciting. So I cannot wait to come and visit you then.
Yes. My understanding is that you may be in Brooklyn at that point as well.
There's a possibility. I know that my wife and I, we like Brooklyn as well. And we're thinking of, we're not moving there at some point. It's something that we would be interested in for sure.
Yeah. Well, we are here to support you when you're ready for that. All right. Let's talk a little bit about what you're most proud of. So that's the question. It's like, we talked about a lot today so far. And it could be something that we talked about. It can be something completely different that we haven't talked about. So, but the question for you, Yo, is what is the thing that you're most proud of?
I think the things I'm the most proud of is my capacity of learning new things, and especially learning new things late in life. It's something that I'm actually very proud. Like I said, I'm extremely proud that I learned how to swim. A year and a half ago. I'm proud that I learned how to ski 2 years ago. Like, I'm proud of okay, I have a lot of fears and I have a lot of those things, but I can actually overcome those. So it's something that I think I'm extremely proud. Then on a personal note, I think I'm proud of, I think the way that me and my wife met and our history, I think has been very unique. And so I was very proud that we actually married, we met in 2005, and then actually I left the US in 2006, and she stayed in the US. So then for a few years, we actually just sent email to each other, pretty much once a week for 3 years. And we were living our lives separately, and we were very good friends, but it was not the time. And then after she went to Africa, I kept being in touch with her. I visited her in the US, I visited her in Africa. And then a moment came, 6 years later, that she was like, let's give it a try. And then she came to France, and we started to live together to see if that was actually the good choice or not. And then at the end we get married and we live together and we're very happy together. But it's something that I think I'm very proud that I did not quit.
Yeah.
When I could have quit, but I kept sending like a message a week, and I kept in touch, and I continued to be there and to support her and to be a good friend. And so I think that's something I'm very, very proud of to have done this, because in life we can easily like stop when it comes when the challenges are ahead of us, then we can easily stop. And so I'm very proud that I did not, and I'm very happy.
Yeah, I think all the people in the audience listening, the hopeless romantics, are like, "Oh, that's so sweet." Like,
it's so French in this one.
It is like this is a combination of like a Nicholas Sparks and like a French romance film. No, it's I know Johann's wife as well, and I'm personally very grateful that you stuck with her, because that's how you and I actually met, through we have a mutual friend, and it's your wife. So I'm really glad that you two did that, and I've experienced your happiness, and it's you're an inspiration for how you two live your life and support each other. And congratulations on it. That's a really cool answer. Really cool.
Thank you.
All right. Ready to get a little bit vulnerable?
Yes, let's go.
All right, you ready? Can I make Yohann cry on here? I'm not going to make you cry. Maybe. No, I won't make you cry. I don't think I can make you cry. Maybe I could. I don't know, but I'm not going to try. But we are going to talk about something. I'm going to ask you about something that you're afraid that might actually be true about you. And full disclosure, I have a gentleman's bet with myself on what your answer is going to be here. And so I love to be right. I love to be right. So I'm hoping you prove me right. And I will tell you if your answer is what I have in my mind. But Yohann, what is something that you're afraid might actually be true about you?
I don't know. I think that I'm just a normal person. And I think that might sound like a little bit weird, but like I said, I come from an environment that like none of my parents went to high school, and I have a PhD. None of my family members have money or have achieved some jobs that would give them a certain types of income. And I have money now. I mean, I don't have a lot of money, but I can go to a restaurant without even like thinking about it. You know what I mean? Like when before, I probably went to a restaurant like once every 5 years as a kid. I don't even remember going to a restaurant with my parents, actually. But I've never been on vacation, but I can go anywhere in the world on vacation now. So I think it's more like all of these things, like what am I afraid of is like a lot of people in my environment see me as like extraordinary. Yeah. And I know it might sound like very, very cocky, but I actually like don't think it is true at all. It's just because I moved to a different environment. It's kind of like I moved from a specific circle to another circle, and now I'm totally normal for that circle. Yeah, and I think that's what I think, and I strongly believe that actually extraordinary things are done by ordinary people. Yeah, and they're just extraordinary because that's how we look at them. We look at them from them being different than us, but they are not different. So I truly believe that I'm not different, and I think that's what it might be true. I'm not different than anybody else.
Yeah, that's a super cool answer. It gets me thinking about, you see, and I've been guilty of this too. You see all these people that, like, I don't know about you, but I have my business heroes, or I'm sure when you were a soccer player, you had your soccer heroes, and you look at all these people and you think about like, oh my God, they either had it handed to them, they were born with it. And most of my business heroes, when you hear them talk, they'll actually say something similar, and they'll say it's a combination of hard work, being authentic, and luck, or like being in the right place at the right time, or some luck. Like it's never like, oh, I just got lucky, but it's like, hey, like I made my own luck. Like I worked hard, and then I had that one meeting with that one person for 10 minutes, and I came into that room and asked them for the thing that changed my life. And they'll say this, that it's nothing about them that's more extraordinary, that it's not that they're more necessarily smarter or more, have more money or even more talented. It's the it's the thing that you went back to, like they're just ordinary people who kept on going, and very likely and I think this is something that you have around you that makes a huge difference too, is I think you have learned how to create a really good support structure around you to support you, to make you more extraordinary than you would be by yourself.
Oh, I like that. And I truly believe in what you're saying. And that's funny because, like I say, I'm teaching a lot of cultural stuff, and this is something important to me. But this made me think, what you said just made me think of racism. Mm-hmm. And right now, you hear all those things about diversity in the US, and that's fascinating to me because most of people are actually, if you look at research, like we're not dealing with racism anymore. Like racism, everybody understands that there is only one race. So we're okay with that. We're actually dealing with neo-racism, which is dealing about social differences. And now you can look at the social differences from the color of your skin, but it's mostly on your social status. And it's fascinating to see that like someone who comes from a lower background might not have the same opportunities.
That's right.
And I remember going to school, and I went to the best business schools in France. And when it was time to go get an internship, then I had no contact. I had my parents, like I said, didn't go to high school. So I didn't know anyone in any company that could help me get an internship. So all my classmates were just like connecting with family members or with people who knew people, and they get those amazing, like jobs at like Mercedes or like Nestle or like those big companies.
Yeah.
And I was doing my internship for like the local company because I had no other options. And that's also something that is important to realize, that this is very important, and to giving access to those circles and access to those different groups of individuals. It's will reduce racism because you will mix people together. So you will mix them, and you will realize that like everybody at the end of the day, like we are good people.
Yeah.
We just don't know each other because we don't mix. That's right. The problem. We stay in our circle and we don't mix. So we look at the other circle like, oh, those people are so different than me. Ooh, I don't want to like mix with them. And that's just my vision. But sorry, we move a little bit past the first question.
Yeah, it's great. No, it's great. That's an important message. All right. I was going to ask you a question, but I think you answered it. So I was just going to ask you about your philosophy on life, but you just shared it with us, or at least a big part of it. And I think, to be clear, you've been sharing it with us for the last hour. So I'm going to move on past that one. I am going to ask you a surprise question, since we have a few more minutes, about 5 more minutes. Please. For anybody out there who's a coach, and I'm sorry, an athletic coach, right? So any sport, doesn't matter the sport, but has a team that their coach, assistant coach, strength coach, position coach, doesn't matter. What's the number one gap that you see for coaches? What's what if I was a coach and I was like, hey, I've got this team where we have a losing record, and I know I have the talent, right? So sometimes you don't have the talent on the team, but I've got a bunch of good players, and you see this in the NFL all the time, right? Where like there's these teams that have these unbelievable players and they just don't win. What's the number one thing that you would advise a coach that they can immediately make a change, or they can immediately do in the locker room that can change their dynamic or do something that can make a difference?
Okay, so 2 things. This is a great question. I love it. So 2 things. First, coaches have to be humble. That's the number one thing. And when I talk to coaches, the first thing is, when a coach tells me it's easier for 100, like in the case of football, 80 players to adapt to one coach than one coach adapt to 80 players. Mm-hmm. I shake hands and I'm like, okay, so we're done. Yeah, we're done. We're not going to work together. Yeah. Like, unfortunately, it's like a teacher. Coaches are like teachers. To be able to connect with your players, you have to use the coaching style that fits with them. So you have to please your player first. And I know it sounds like, this guy is a little star and he's a diva. And then like, it means like I have to like agree with that diva attitude. Yes, you have to. The first time, you got to make one step forward, meet the person where he's at. So do this, and then slowly bring the athletes where you want the athlete to be at the end, which means bring him to you and your coaching style. But it's like a kid. First, you adapt to the kid, and then you slowly teach the kid how to change that behavior. But you have to respond right away to that attitude. So now you connect, and now you agree. You don't create a wall with the player. So that's the first thing to do. So you have to first go and meet the player where he's at. So adapt your coaching style to each player on the team first. And then the process that I like to use when we don't have time, because we don't have much time, like with the teams, the season's very short. I like to use what I call the role management, which is based on giving a role to every single player. I believe that leadership, it's actually something that there is no ideal leadership. Like if any types of leadership works. But I believe that we can actually be stronger as a team if we use every type of leadership together. So my vision is leadership is like a pie that you can cut into pieces. And if you give one piece to every single guy, then you have more chance to win. So I'm giving a little bit more explanation. But if you look at the theory of team cohesion, it's based on three things. The task, you have to have task complementarity. So you say in English? Yes.
Complementary.
So so you need to have experts. You need to have support players, and you need to have people who will execute. So then you divide all your tasks among all your team, and everybody knows their task, and they're going to be good at that task. That's what they need to do. This is what usually teams do on a regular basis. What they don't do, it's the second aspect. It's the to complement each other on the relationship basis. So to succeed on a team, you need to have communication. Then you need to have accountability. Then you need to have the capacity to build a team. So when you talk about communication, you have to divide. So you need to have players who will give technical and tactical advice to others. Then you need other guys that will be cheerleaders and just boost you positively, like give you some positive attitude. Then you need to have some devil's advocate. Separate those roles among some of your players. So not one player has to do everything. Same thing for the accountability providers, which means you need role models on the team. That doesn't have to be the same guy. Why would you have the same guy to be the role model, the best player, the guy who gives all the communication, the guy that also is trying to support everybody, be like the captain, the captain's servant? Like it's impossible. Nobody can do that. But if you separate those tasks among your players, then now you're going to be able to do that, which also gives you the role models will be those guys, and that's what they're bringing. And another guy can be like a complete foreigner. It can be somebody that is extremely creative, does not follow the rules, does not do that, but that's okay. It doesn't have to be the role models. We have enough role models to follow. His input will be the creativity, all of that stuff. He arrives late at practice, no big deal. That's not what he's here for. He's not here to be on time at practice. He's here to do this specific task, but he has to do them well. And then he will be accountable on the task that he's supposed to do. And that's why he's on the team. So,
that's awesome.
So it's like redividing all the tasks and dividing this. So then you have all the skills possible within the entire team. That's what usually works a lot. And I've done that with so many teams now that this works every single time. I'm not even lying. We just won the Big 12 with the women's soccer team. First time in the history.
Nice.
Like it's not about, I joke with the coaches all the time. Like if you have a team full of donkeys, they will still be donkeys, but they will be the best donkeys. So they're going to beat all the other donkeys, but you're not going to beat the horses.
That's right.
Now, if you have a team full of horses and you compete to try to win, now you're going to beat those horses because you have that competitive advantage by using the strength of every single person on your team. And that's what you're bringing. You recruit them for a skill that is useful for the entire team. And you can also play. Now, if you're missing a player, you can replace it by somebody else. And it's very easy to explain what is the role, what is the task, what is the actions expected from you. And this is the way I evaluate it. This is how I will measure that you have accomplished what I told you to do.
That's awesome, man. That's some awesome advice. And I hope for anybody listening out there who's involved with sports, definitely want to connect with Yohann. As you can see, he knows a lot about the topic. So we are at time, and I'm going to leave with what I always do with all my amazing guests, is ask you to leave us with some words of wisdom and some short words of wisdom. So what would you like to, what are in the words of Yohann, or you can quote your favorite philosopher, you can quote your favorite athlete, doesn't really matter. What are the words of wisdom that you'd like to leave the audience with?
Wow, this is actually something interesting. And I'm looking all around me to see if I don't have any of those Post-it notes anywhere that will help me. But I think the thing that I like, and I always use that one, is remember who you are.
Yeah, I love that.
And that means that know yourself, because you need to evaluate who you are to know what you need to work on. So I think like really understanding who you are is crucial, because now you're going to do something that makes sense. Yeah. Like sometimes, you got to get small wins every so often. So by knowing where you're at, you know what you can accomplish and what will need time to be accomplished, or several steps. And you should not be jumping like 3 steps ahead, or you're going to fall. So really remembering who you are can help you grow, but it can also help you like be a better person and connect better with others, and just, like have a better conversation with one another. So that's what I believe.
Yeah,
remember
I love that.
You are.
Yohann, thank you so much for being on today. It's been a journey to get you on here, and I know that's on me, but I'm glad we finally got a chance to record this. Can't wait to get this out to the audience. I wish you the very best in everything you're up to, the marriage, the business, the professoring, if I'm making up a word, professoring, and all the other things you're up to. I wish you the best of luck in all that, and have a happy holiday. We're recording this here at the beginning of December 2020, and wish you and your family and everybody else happy holiday. And I look forward to connecting with you soon.
Thank you very much, Jason. It was a great time, and I hope the listeners enjoyed it as much as I did. So thank you again.
Thanks, Yohann.
Thanks for listening to another episode of Talking to Cool People with Jason Frizzell. If you enjoyed today's episode, please tell your friends. Follow us on Instagram and Facebook, and give us a shout out, or take a moment to leave a review on iTunes. If something from today's episode piqued your interest and you'd like to connect, email us at podcast@jasonfrizzell.com. We love hearing from our listeners because you're cool people too.